They buried Edmund Ashford on a gray Tuesday in October. He wore the same brown coat he'd worn for 30 years, a plain pine coffin, the kind reserved for people who couldn't afford better. Half of Ashcroft showed up, not because they loved him, because they pitied him.
"Poor old Edmund," they whispered, "never had two coins to rub together." Nobody in that crowd knew they were standing at the funeral of the richest man Ashcroft had ever produced. Nobody knew yet. But this is where the whole story took a dramatic twist. Let's get into it now. Ashcroft was a town of 18,427 people, built on railway, freight, timber, and agriculture. Average household income, $42,300 a year. Enough to get by, not enough to dream big. Edmund had worked 41 years as a railway accountant. Modest job, modest pay. He walked everywhere. Old shoes, resoled twice. A small cottage on Miller Street with a gutter he never fixed. He never complained. He never explained himself either. And that silence was exactly what convinced everyone he had nothing.
Then Daniel asked, "Mr. Ashford, why do you still wear that old coat?" Edmund, smiling gently, "My buildings don't care what I wear." Daniel looking surprised. "Buildings?" Edmund just smiled and kept walking. That was the first thread. Daniel pulled it for years. Here's what nobody in Ashcroft understood. Edmund never tried to look rich. He only ever tried to become rich, a distinction most people never learn. In his 30s, while colleagues spent their bonuses on furniture, Edmund bought a run-down 4-unit building near the freight yard for $11,000, more than the average home in town. People thought he'd overpaid for a wreck. What they didn't calculate was the rent, $340 a month against a mortgage of roughly $1,200 a year. After taxes and repairs, that one building cleared close to $2,200 in pure cash flow annually, while Edmund still worked his day job. He didn't spend it. He reinvested it. By his 40s, 6 properties. By his 50s, 17. Rent from one building, bought the next. Debt was never the goal. It was a tool, used carefully, then paid down while the properties appreciated and the income compounded. Compounding is patient. It rewards people who don't need applause. An asset that quietly pays you every month is worth infinitely more than a car that quietly costs you every month. While Edmund built in silence, Victor Kane built in public. Victor opened a chain of retail stores across 3 counties. Newspapers loved him. He financed a $1.4 million mansion, 4 imported cars, and a lifestyle that seemed to prove what success looked like. Everyone admired Victor. Everyone pitied Edmund. Nobody asked the simple question, how much of what Victor owned did he actually own? And how much did the bank own? Victor's stores were profitable on paper, but every expansion was financed with new debt stacked on old debt, serviced by revenue that assumed growth would never slow down. It slowed down. Years later, Margaret Ellis got access to the county's filings, cross-referencing the property registry against town council minutes. One name kept appearing on dozens of small, unremarkable purchases stretching back 40 years. Boarding houses, grain warehouses, a stake in the freight depot, a share of the timber mill's land. But none of it flashy. All of it paid for. Victor Kane's records told a different story. Liens, refinanced loans, a debt load that had tripled in 5 years. Margaret realized she'd been writing about the wrong man. Edmund Ashford died at 79, in his sleep, in the same small cottage on Miller Street.
At the reading of his estate, Jonathan Pierce opened a ledger that had been sealed in his office for decades. The room went silent. 127 properties, 34 registered businesses, 612 employees across the county, an estate valued at $48 million, 0 outstanding debt. Daniel Brooks, now a senior banker himself, sat in the back row and finally understood the answer to a question he'd asked half a lifetime ago. My buildings don't care what I wear.
Now let us look at the stealth wealth lesson in this story. The lesson is to never spend less. The lesson in this: ownership beats appearance. Cash flow beats status. Assets buy freedom. Liabilities rent the illusion of it. Debt shouts. Money whispers. Wealth is invisible right up until the moment it compounds into something undeniable. Edmund Ashford was never poor. He simply never needed anyone to know he was rich. People spend their lives trying to look wealthy. Edmund spent his life becoming wealthy. By the time the town understood the difference, it was already too late. This is Review Daddy. Do you like this story? Then watch our next story, The Richest Man in Town That Drove the Oldest Car. Watch it on your screen now.